Welcome to Southern Cooking Made Simple, y'all. Easy to understand recipes today from my grandmother Lily Missouri Klein, a Cherokee Indian.
For some food like Grandma used to make. Remember how good it was to go to Grandma's house? You'd roll up and she'd have fried chicken, chicken and dumplings on Sunday, dressing, wilted lettuce and green beans, mashed potatoes and gravy and biscuits and coleslaw, whatever she had on the table. I was up for it, wasn't you? Well, my grandmother was a Cherokee Indian and her name was Lily Missouri. She married Bernard Breckenridge Legg back in the day, and she cooked everything the way that I'm going to teach you how to cook. Now, Grandma cooked on an old wood-fired cook stove that sat catty corner in her kitchen. She didn't have a sink, so we used a dishpan and a little table. She didn't have a refrigerator, so we got everything out of the cellar. And you had to draw the water up from the well before you could make anything or wash anything, and you had to go get the wood and the kindling and all that stuff so you could start a fire in the stove. Before you could ever even begin to start cooking, you had to bring that oven up to temperature. So today, I'm going to teach you how to cook the way my grandma cooked.
Grandma Lily had 12 kids, y'all. Can you imagine cooking for 12 kids?
All of the leftover broths off of everything she cooked in something else. Now I'm going to use the leftover broth from the chicken breast, which she used scraps. She used the back, the neck, and all the skin and junk pieces and cut the rest of that chicken up in 500 pieces so we'd all get a piece. There was a bunch of us. And you know, we was poor, but we didn't know that. Nobody ever told us we was poor, so we didn't think of it as being poor. We were rich as could be because we had love and all this yummy food to eat. And who knew it's just water and flour and a little bit of chicken? I'm just saying. So what I'm going to do is, now that I've got the chicken boiling, I'm going to set my timer for 18 minutes for that breast. I've got my oven on and it's heating up, and I'm going to put the chicken breast that I've stuffed with the stuffing in the oven and get that going. Now, the broth that comes off with the potatoes, I'm going to use that in my gravy here in a little bit. And then we'll make a thickening to go on the chicken and dumplings. So I'm going to let this simmer for 18 minutes at this low rate right here. Exactly what you're seeing, just little tiny bubbles. And I'm going to let that simmer until I come back. Hello, everybody. Today we're making an old-timey country meal like my grandma used to make. Her name was Lily Missouri Klein. She was a Cherokee Indian, and she married Bernard Breckenridge Legg back in the day, and we used to go to her house every Sunday, and she would go out in the yard and get a chicken and wring his neck, and she would make mashed potatoes, chicken and dumplings. And I stuffed my chicken breast today. I didn't use a whole chicken like she did, so I just used chicken breast. And I stuffed those. They're getting ready to go in the oven. And in this pan, I have water, 1 chicken breast, 1/4 of a stick of butter, a 1/2 teaspoon of rubbed sage, salt and pepper, 2 tablespoons of chicken bouillon, and 1 chicken breast. And I'm bringing that up to a boil, and I'm going to simmer that 15 or 20 minutes until that chicken breast is just done. Now in this pan, I have new potatoes out of the garden, and I just peeled them, cut them up a little bit, and put them in water with about a tablespoon of butter, salt, and pepper. And inside of my dumplings It's a really simple recipe. It's nothing but flour, self-rising flour, buttermilk, egg, salt, pepper, and rub sage seasoning. And these types, and a tablespoon of oil. Now in my recipe, I doubled mine because I wanted more dumplings this evening. And so instead of just using 1 1/4 cups of flour for a regular meal, I used a double recipe. And so that's 2 tablespoons of oil, but only 1 egg. And I mix that up real well. And then I'm letting that sit and proof for a little bit while I'm bringing the chicken and dumplings up to a boil. Now, the meat. When I'm bringing that chicken up to a boil, I want to, as soon as it comes to a rolling boil, I'm going to turn the heat down and just simmer that lowly for about 15 to 20 minutes. It was a pretty big sized chicken breast. And when that comes to a boil, and I'll time that, I'm bringing this to a boil. Now that we have the potatoes boiling and we have the chicken boiling, I'm going to start the green beans on this burner. In my pan, I've got 1 onion, small, chopped up. So a shortcut, so I don't have to fry bacon. Put about a good tablespoon. Now I'm going to fry that onion until it's caramelized. And when it's caramelized, then we can go on to the next step. Now, in this cup, I have 1 full cup of water, and I've drained the juice off of my green beans that I canned up. And when you caramelize the onion, then it's time to put the other stuff in. Now, since this has been boiling 15 minutes, stop my timer. Take out my chicken breast. And I don't like that goop right there, so I'm going to remove that. It's just blood. Blood and fond, but it has to come out. It makes your dumplings kind of mealy, and they have a different texture. Just take out the funk. Add back any broth. And then I'm going to shred that chicken breast. Now in my pan, where the chicken breast was boiled, turn that down so they won't boil over. Just to a slow simmer there. And what I'm going to do is just take the flour dumpling mixture that I mixed up earlier and drop that off in spoonfuls. Big ones and little ones. It don't make any difference. They all get done at the same time. Now the oil is what makes, and the egg is what makes them stick together. You can make dumplings without oil, but they won't stick together. Not even if you put an egg in there. I'm just saying. Now, once you get them dumplings dropped in there, you don't touch them. You can turn your pan like this, make sure they're not sticking or something. You don't touch them dumplings. They fall apart. So I'm just dropping them in, and they'll make their own way down in there. I'll blow up out of there. Because when it rises, it's going to get taller than the pan. And touch my timer for 10 minutes, because they sit there for the timer 10 minutes off of a lid and 10 minutes on with a lid. Now if I touch them right now, even though they're going to have to go in that pan, they'll fall apart. One sitting on top, he's going under. Now, my onion has begun to caramelize. See the brown in there? That means caramelized. And I'm going to put in my green beans. And my full coffee cup of water. black pepper, and about a half a teaspoon of salt. Now we put the chicken in the oven. It's been in there for 15 minutes. You just put it in there with the buttermilk right on top of it, just the way you had it. That's how you put it in the oven. The buttermilk is acidic and it actually starts to cook the chicken before you ever put it into the oven. And it makes it very, very moist. And what we're going to do is cook this until the dumplings firm.
Southern cooking made simple, y'all. Recipes the way Grandma used to make. Y'all come back now. Please like and subscribe. I just added 1 tablespoon of butter, salt, and pepper to the potatoes so they can boil. Now you want the dumplings to have a good consistency, like a biscuit dough you were making and you were getting ready to pour this out onto your floured waxed paper. That's exactly the way you want your dumplings to be. And if you don't put 2 tablespoons of oil in there, they will not stick together. Now when I made my stovetop dressing, I just made that in the microwave, and all I put in there was the chicken bouillon, and after it cooled, I put in 1 egg, and then that way it'll stick together inside of my chicken breast. This is just a simple recipe out of things that I already had at the house, things that I can share with you guys and show you the way that my grandma used to cook. Oh, she was a wonderful cook. She would cook on that wood-fired stove, and the smells that would come from that kitchen would starve you to death waiting on dinner. She didn't have a sink, so we'd go out back and draw the water up out of the well in a bucket before we'd ever bring it in to heat it on the stove to get started for dinner. She didn't have a refrigerator, so we had to go out and get into the cellar to get things that had been kept cold out there. And at Grandma's house, you never made leftovers. Pretty much everything that Grandma cooked was exactly how many portions that she was going to need that day. She about always had a pot of beans cooking somewhere. Now I'm just taking these chicken breasts and just cutting down the center. And they're so much easier to do them flat on the counter. You'll see. Just make the cutting right down the middle, about 1 inch from the edge in the back, keeping it like a little pocket all the way through. This is a delicious recipe. Your whole family will love it. And it's simple. It's also something that you can make ahead and put in the freezer to make freezer meals for those cold months ahead. Now, once you get them split down the middle, you also want to take salt and pepper and salt inside of the pockets to make sure that you have absolutely seasoned every part of your meal. The salt and the pepper are the most 2 important spices that you'll have in your kitchen. Now, when I'm doing chicken, I try to always make just as many pieces as we're going to need, and then if I do have any left over, we can put those in the freezer for freezer meals. This is a delicious meal, and it's also something, if you made these for the freezer, you wouldn't bake them. You just make them, fix them up, put them in the aluminum pan like this, and butter your pan, put them in there, butter the top of the chicken, and then freeze it. And when you need it, just pop it in the oven, and you have delicious baked chicken stuffed on top of that. And all of the other components that go with this meal can also be frozen ahead of time and put in containers. And when you're ready for your Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner, all you have to do is just put this stuff in the oven and entertain your guest. Just put as much stuffing in each one of them as you're going to need for one serving. And then we'll get on to the dumplings. Drizzle a little bit of buttermilk over the top, and this starts the cooking process, but it also makes it brown really well because buttermilk has butter in it, and it's really easy to smooth over the top, and it makes it brown really well in the oven. And time your breast. Like for these 2 chicken breasts, you're going to need probably 15 to 20 minutes a piece, unfrozen, and add 10 to 15 minutes because you have the stuffing in the center. So I would bake these for 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the size of the breast, at 350 degrees. Now I'm mixing in salt, pepper, 2 tablespoons of oil, about 2 cups of flour. I doubled my recipe here today. And you can use egg or not. It just depends on you. It doesn't make them stick together. What it does actually is make them fall apart. So I omitted the egg today. I like the texture of my dumplings to stick together, and then I make a thickening over the broth so that it kind of looks like the center of a chicken pot pie, if you will. Now I'm adding in the oil there, and I want this to be a sticky consistency, and I'm just going to drop these over into the boiling water that I boiled the chicken in for 20 minutes. So I just used chicken breast, and I stuffed those. They're getting ready to go in the oven. And in this pan, I have water, 1 chicken breast, 1/4 of a stick of butter, 1/2 teaspoon of rubbed sage, salt and pepper, 2 tablespoons of chicken bouillon, and 1 chicken breast. And I'm bringing that up to a boil, and I'm going to simmer that 15 or 20 minutes until that chicken breast is just done. Now in this pan, I have new potatoes out of the garden, and I just peeled them, cut them up a little bit, and put them in water